I stood in my kitchen, barefoot and bleary-eyed, sipping coffee and trying to remember if I had left the garage door open again, when the shriek of a whistle pierced the morning calm. I stepped onto the deck and blinked in disbelief. There were people in my pool. Not just one or two. Dozens. Floating, splashing, drinking, sunbathing. My lounge chairs were occupied. My grill was smoking with sausages I didn't buy. My dog, Charlie, sat trapped in the corner of the yard, staring at me with a look that clearly said, "You seeing this too?" And in the center of the chaos, seated on my inflatable pizza slice with a plastic crown on her head, was Karen from the HOA. She raised her drink in a toast to the crowd and shouted, "Welcome to the second annual Karempalooza Pool Bash." My jaw hit the deck so hard it nearly cracked the wood. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought I was hallucinating. I hadn't planned a party. I didn't authorize a party. In fact, I had only stepped out that morning to grab a breakfast sandwich and pick up my dry cleaning. I'd been gone maybe an hour. Somehow, in that short time span, my backyard had transformed into a beachside club, complete with a DJ booth powered by an extension cord that was very much plugged into my outdoor outlet. As I took a step forward, still barefoot, I tripped over a cooler someone had left by the patio stairs. A bikini-clad woman I'd never seen before turned to me and said, "Hey bro, can we get more ice?" I stared at her, speechless, and walked straight past her into the crowd. I felt like a stranger in my own yard. People smiled at me, mistaking me for one of the guests. Someone slapped me on the back and yelled, "Sick party, man." A kid ran past me with a super soaker. I dodged him, grabbed a towel from my own drying rack, and stormed over to the queen of the circus herself. Karen was basking in the shallow end of the pool like she was posing for a centerfold in Pool Invasion Weekly. She wore oversized sunglasses, a blinding floral cover-up, and an air of smug satisfaction that only comes from committing a felony and assuming no one can stop you. She noticed me approaching, gave me a slow up-and-down look and said, "Oh good, you're back. I was just telling everyone you'd love to host." I was silent for a second, mostly because the words weren't computing. "You're in my pool," I said. "With 30 strangers. And a catering truck parked on my grass." Karen waved dismissively. "Technicalities. This neighborhood is about community, Matt. Togetherness. And what better way to unite than around your gorgeous pool? I mean, it's practically wasted on you." "Wasted on me?" She gestured around. "You hardly ever use it. We all thought you were out of town. I printed flyers and everything." She pointed to a stack of glossy sheets sitting on my poolside table with the words Karempalooza Pool Bash in Comic Sans. "And don't worry, I told everyone you were cool with it." My pulse quickened. "You broke into my house." "Oh please." The side gate was open. "That's practically an invitation." "Because I was taking the trash out yesterday." "Well, you should have locked it if you didn't want guests." "Lesson learned." I blinked slowly. "Karen, this is trespassing. Calm down. Everyone will be gone by sunset. Just relax and enjoy. I even saved you a hot dog." She pointed to a sad, shriveled tube of meat on a paper plate slowly curling in the sun. I turned and walked straight into the house. Behind me, someone yelled, "Beer pong round 2!" as the music volume surged. Inside, I grabbed my phone and dialed the police. A dispatcher picked up. I explained the situation. Her response was so calm it nearly caused me to short-circuit. "Sir, if there's no sign of forced entry and the individual claims it was an authorized gathering, this is considered a civil matter. Do you have a lease or document proving sole ownership?" "I own the house," I said. "Can you provide digital proof? Do you have a deed on hand?" I blinked. "You want me to send you a PDF while 30 strangers are doing tequila shots in my yard?" "That would help, yes." I hung up. It took all my self-control not to scream. I sat on my couch and stared at the party happening through my glass doors. I watched a guy in swim trunks try to do a flip into the pool and land flat on his back. I watched a woman spill wine on my outdoor furniture. I watched Karen perform a fully choreographed dance to some remix of Dancing Queen. And then I saw Charlie, still stuck by the garden shed, whimpering because no one would let him through. My fists clenched. This wasn't just a party. This was theft, humiliation, and a public declaration that my rights didn't matter. I had stayed quiet through Karen's dozens of HOA emails about the acceptable flower colors. I had ignored her drama with the guy across the street over wind chimes. But this was war. I spent the rest of the day sitting inside, gathering video evidence, taking pictures, cataloging every trespass. I made a folder called Karen's Crimes and labeled it by hour. At 5 p.m., the DJ's generator blew out, and Karen yelled at one of the kids for not clapping on beat. At 6 p.m., the tacos ran out, and a brawl broke out over the last cup of guac. By 7 p.m., the grass was destroyed, the pool was filled with leaves, and one of the speakers had fallen in and started hissing. Still, the party raged on. When the final guest stumbled out, and Karen toweled off like nothing had happened, she waved cheerfully at my security cam and called out, "Thanks for the venue." That night, I sat in the dark at my kitchen table with Charlie at my feet and rage in my chest. I replayed the footage of the party. I zoomed in on Karen's smug face as she pretended she had every right to be there. And then, in a moment of pure, shining inspiration, I remembered something I'd seen online years ago. A prank involving bouncy balls. Thousands of them. Enough to fill a school hallway and flood a classroom. And I thought to myself, what if I took it up a notch? I opened my laptop and started calculating. Pool dimensions. Ball volume. Delivery timelines. Karen had thrown a party in my yard without asking. But next time she showed up uninvited, I'd make sure it was a party she, and the entire internet, would never forget. I barely slept that night, my brain running faster than my laptop's cooling fan. While the memory of Karen's smug face replayed like a cursed gif, I kept refreshing tabs for wholesale toy suppliers. 10,000 bouncy balls sounded absurd at first, but as I sat there with a calculator and a stubborn streak longer than Karen's party guest list, it began to seem not just possible, but necessary. The plan wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my home. Karen had made me a bystander in my own yard. She threw a party and left me picking up beer cans like some underpaid intern. But the next party? That would be mine. And it would end in the most glorious, rubber-filled chaos this town had ever seen. First, I had to know if 10,000 bouncy balls would even work. I pulled up pool specs. Mine was about 28 feet long, 12 feet wide, and around 5 feet deep. That meant roughly 12,000 gallons of water. Would 10,000 balls even cover the surface? Maybe not fill it to the brim, but certainly enough to overwhelm anyone in it. Imagine mid-sip of a margarita and suddenly being body-slammed by a rainbow avalanche. That's what I wanted. Utter madness. But controlled madness. Beautiful, engineered mayhem. The logistics were tricky. I couldn't exactly go to one store and buy 10,000 balls without triggering some kind of fraud investigation or earning myself a nickname like Bounce Man. So I split the orders. 1,000 here. 2,000 there. I used different addresses. My P.O. box, my friend's workshop, even a delivery locker outside of town. I staggered the delivery dates, marked some as school event materials to avoid weird questions, and used burner email accounts. If the FBI ever audited my online activity that week, they'd probably think I was either building a bouncy ball bomb or opening the weirdest daycare in America. While the orders trickled in, I maintained total silence to Karen. No passive-aggressive text. No HOA replies. Just silence. I wanted her guard down. I wanted her to believe she'd won, that I'd rolled over and accepted her as queen of pool theft. She had no idea I was laying the foundation for the most glorious pool sabotage known to man. The opportunity came quicker than expected. 3 days later, an HOA email hit my inbox titled, "Upcoming Neighborhood Unity Event." I almost choked on my cereal. It was from Karen, of course, and she was planning yet another poolside social. This time she called it Float and Flourish, a mindful mixer. According to the flyer, there'd be yoga mats, smoothie bars, and a guy named Brad who would be playing pan flute near the diving board. The email ended with, hosted generously by Matt H. Thanks, neighbor, with a winking emoji that somehow felt like a slap in the face. I stared at the screen, teeth grinding. She wasn't just doing it again, she was doubling down. But now it was perfect. The bouncy balls would be arriving over the next few days. I had a deadline. I had motivation. All I needed was help, and I knew exactly who to recruit. The twins next door, Jack and Lila, were 16, slightly feral, and always one step away from suspension. They had a YouTube prank channel that had once gotten them banned from the local mall. They owed me a favor after I'd vouched for them during an HOA complaint Karen filed last fall about inappropriate leaf blower activity. I found them in their garage, where they were apparently trying to build a potato cannon that could shoot frozen hot dogs. When I pitched them the plan, their eyes lit up like it was Christmas morning. We got to work immediately. They offered to build the launch system, some kind of air-compressed contraption using PVC piping and a scuba tank, which sounded deeply illegal but also extremely effective. I focused on concealment. We needed to stash the balls around the yard in a way that wouldn't arouse suspicion. Karen had a tendency to snoop, especially when she thought she was entitled to something. So I used the deck storage, hollowed-out garden planters, even stuffed mesh laundry bags full of balls and sank them into the pool's deep end with brick. I knew the exact day she'd be arriving for her precious mixer. Everything needed to be hidden, loaded, and ready for glorious detonation. A few days before the party, Karen dropped by unannounced. She was wearing a kaftan and aviator sunglasses, carrying what looked like a clipboard and an iced coffee. She didn't knock. She didn't ask. She just strolled into my backyard like she was inspecting property she'd already bought. I was watering the grass, casually standing between her and one of the hidden stash zones. She gave me a fake smile and said, "Just doing a quick layout check for Sunday. You'll want to tidy the hedges a bit, and can you move the grill to the other side? Brad has asthma and we don't want smoke near the flute." I didn't move. I stared at her, hose still running. "You do realize this is my house, right?" She laughed. "Oh, Matt. Don't be petty. It's one afternoon. One afternoon where people drink on my patio, climb into my pool, and spill juice on my dog." She waved her hand. "Drama, drama. You have such a great space. You should be honored the community feels comfortable here." "I feel so honored I might cry." "Anyway," she said, ignoring the sarcasm, "we'll be here around 10 a.m. for setup. Please have the outdoor fridge stocked. Brad likes mango nectar, not orange. It gives him gas." She turned and walked off without another word. I stared after her, then looked at Charlie, who had come outside just in time to witness the tail end of the invasion preview. I looked down at the hose still running, the wet patch of grass at my feet, and whispered, "It's go time." Saturday night, the backyard transformed into a covert operation zone. Jack and Lila arrived dressed like tactical prank soldiers, complete with camo hoodies and Nerf holsters. We did a full sweep of the yard, testing the launch angles, setting the timing, and making sure no balls had leaked from their hiding spots. Lila even created a fake relaxation zone, using yoga mats and incense sticks near the cannon's blast zone to make sure Karen would be nearby when the storm hit. By midnight, everything was locked, loaded, and waterproof. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, adrenaline buzzing through me like static. The house was silent except for the occasional bark from Charlie. The neighborhood didn't know it yet, but tomorrow they'd witness an HOA party so unforgettable it would echo through gossip chains for decades. Karen was going to walk into that backyard thinking she owned the world. And by the time it was over, she'd be the star of a slow-motion rubber disaster seen by millions. The countdown had begun. Sunday morning arrived with the deceptive calm of a peaceful suburban dream. The sky was cloudless, the birds chirped their typical overcheerful tunes, and somewhere in the distance, a leaf blower hummed like the opening act to something far more chaotic. I was up before the sun, double-checking every stash point, ensuring no last-minute leaks, loose bricks, or misplaced bags could sabotage what I had spent the past week meticulously planning. The twins arrived at 7, wheeling in the PVC launcher disguised inside an inflatable paddleboard case. I had to admit, their commitment to the bit was almost as impressive as their ability to engineer borderline illegal contraptions using leftover plumbing supplies and duct tape. By 8, the first wave of Karen's guests started to trickle in. Most were wearing designer yoga outfits and carried rolled-up mats like they were attending some high-profile wellness retreat. Someone tried to plug in their phone charger and looked confused when the outlet wasn't working. I had disabled every single one of them the night before, except the one that powered our compressor. That one had a very special destiny. Karen arrived at 9, dressed like a discount cruise director, flowing tunic, oversized sun hat, and a whistle around her neck as if she were about to lead a synchronized swimming team. She took a lap around the yard, hands on hips, offering unsolicited advice to her volunteer setup crew. It was like watching an emperor survey her stolen empire. She didn't even acknowledge me. Not even a nod. Just a passing glance that said, "You may live here, but I run this show." I stayed quiet, playing my role as the grumpy homeowner who had begrudgingly agreed to let it happen again. In reality, I had full control. I even wore a GoPro on my chest, hidden beneath a button-up shirt with the top open, capturing every angle of what was about to unfold. By 10, the party was in full swing. Smooth jazz wafted through portable Bluetooth speakers. A man in a linen shirt and far too many bracelets guided a circle of attendees through deep breathing exercises. Brad, the flute guy, was standing on the diving board, preparing for his healing tones. Karen stood nearby, posing for selfies with 2 women who were already 3 mimosas deep. I waited patiently, watching the clock and mentally timing each phase of the event. Everything was falling perfectly into place. Jack gave me a subtle signal from behind the grill station, where he was pretending to restock a cooler. Lila was posted near the shed, fingers resting lightly on the remote that would trigger the first volley. We had rehearsed it like a military drill. 3 phases. Phase 1, shock. Phase 2, saturation. Phase 3, the launch. At exactly 10:18 a.m., I walked to the center of the patio and cleared my throat. "Excuse me," I called out, raising a hand. A few people turned. Karen looked confused and slightly annoyed that I was daring to speak without being summoned. "Just wanted to say a quick thank you to all of Karen's guests for joining us today. I hope you've all had a refreshing and deeply spiritual experience so far." Karen rolled her eyes and tried to interrupt, but I kept going. "In honor of the overwhelming community spirit this gathering represents, I'd like to offer a special surprise. Consider it a cleansing ritual, a return to innocence, a baptism of joy." Before she could protest, I gave Lila the signal. A faint pop sounded from the back of the yard as the first hidden compartment opened. Bright, colorful bouncy balls began rolling across the lawn. At first, people thought it was an accident, maybe a broken container of kids' toys. But then more started appearing. Dozens. Hundreds. Rolling down the steps, across the grass, into the pool. Screams of confusion turned to shrieks of surprise as balls started hitting ankles, bouncing off shins, rolling under yoga mats, and toppling juice glasses. Karen turned toward me, eyes wide. "What is this?" I shrugged. "Energy release. Very holistic." She opened her mouth to respond just as Phase 2 hit. Jack triggered the secondary wave. Hidden mesh bags submerged in the pool burst open simultaneously. Thousands of balls shot upward, propelled by the sudden release of their underwater constraints. The pool, once serene and sparkling, transformed into a vibrating kaleidoscope of rubber chaos. People fell in. A woman shouted that her phone was ruined. Brad tried to keep playing the flute, only to have a rogue ball knock it out of his hands. Karen screamed as a cascade of pink and yellow spheres poured down on her like a technicolor tidal wave. And then came the grand finale. With a hiss of compressed air and a boom that echoed down the block, the main launcher erupted. A wave of balls shot 20 feet into the air, raining down like multicolored hail. They bounced off umbrellas, heads, drinks, and chairs. The entire backyard was transformed into a vibrating, bouncing, shrieking storm of panic and comedy. People scrambled for exits. Someone slipped on a ball and cannonballed into the flower bed. Another guest tried to run but tripped into the pool, dragging a floating speaker in with him. Sparks flew. The music cut out. Karen stood frozen, arms out, dripping wet, her once majestic tunic plastered to her like a sad jellyfish. Her whistle dangled limply around her neck, and her makeup had started to run. She looked at me, mouth open in horror, and whispered the only words she could manage. "What did you do?" I stepped forward calmly and picked up a single rogue bouncy ball from the ground. "You wanted a mindful mixer," I said. "I just added the bounce." The twins were already filming everything. Multiple cameras, wide shots, slow-motion captures. It was art. Beautiful, chaotic art. The guests, realizing the party was ruined, began fleeing through the gate, muttering, yelling, dripping pool water and bouncy balls behind them. One guy slipped on the sidewalk, got up, and just started laughing uncontrollably. "This is insane," he shouted, still laughing. "This is the worst party I've ever been to." As the last few partygoers trickled out, the backyard looked like a birthday clown had exploded. Floating decorations were tangled in bushes, yoga mats were half submerged, and the pool was now so densely covered in balls you couldn't see the water beneath. Karen stood alone near the grill, her crown now crooked on her head. She looked like a dethroned monarch after a failed revolution. I walked up to her, leaned in, and said softly, "Next time you plan a party at someone else's house, maybe ask first." She glared at me, sputtering, but no words came out. Just a high-pitched noise somewhere between a gasp and a wheeze. By the time the twins packed up the camera gear, and I started sweeping balls off the deck, neighbors were already peeking out their windows. One woman across the street clapped. Another gave me a thumbs up. For the first time in weeks, I felt peace. Not the kind you get from breathing exercises and pan flutes, but the kind that comes from delivering justice so beautifully that even the victims can't help but admire the spectacle. Karen finally stormed off, squelching with every step, balls sticking to her legs as she marched down the driveway. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't even look back. And as she turned the corner, dragging a piece of streamer with her shoe, I picked up Charlie and whispered, "We won." He licked my face, and for the first time in a long while, the backyard felt like mine again. By the following morning, the video was already starting to circulate. Jack had worked fast, editing overnight while Lila added reaction clips and perfectly timed slow-motion zooms of Karen's meltdown. They titled the video, "HOA Karen Gets Buried in 10,000 Bouncy Balls After Stealing Pool," and uploaded it to their channel with hashtags like #KarenFail and #RubberRevenge. Within hours, it had blown past 50,000 views. By lunch, it was over 100,000. By dinner, people I hadn't spoken to in years were messaging me screenshots of the trending clip on Reddit. The internet, as always, had chosen its side, and it was not Karen's. Meanwhile, Karen was unraveling in real life. Her first move was to call an emergency HOA meeting, claiming a member of the community had orchestrated an act of domestic sabotage that left her emotionally and physically scarred. She came into the meeting wearing a wrist brace, which was interesting considering the only time she touched the ground was when she slipped, landed on a pool float, and slowly spun in a circle like a deflating balloon. She told the board she had been traumatized, humiliated, and physically endangered by my unhinged prank and demanded I be fined, possibly evicted, and forced to issue a public apology. To her surprise, half the HOA board members had already seen the video. One of them, Mr. Dorsey, actually laughed out loud mid-meeting and had to excuse himself. Another said, and I quote, "Frankly, Karen, after everything you've pulled this year, I think you're lucky all he used were bouncy balls and not an actual lawsuit." The tide had turned. Suddenly, Karen wasn't the respected organizer of community event. She was a nuisance, a repeat trespasser, and, thanks to her own words in the video, a very publicly exposed liar. Karen tried to pivot, claiming I'd doctored the footage and manipulated the narrative. But Lila had uploaded uncut footage from multiple angles. There was no denying what had happened. Karen had walked into my yard, uninvited, thrown a party, and reacted with the fury of someone who believed she could never be challenged. Now she was being challenged on all fronts, by the board, by the internet, and by her own growing infamy. Later that week, I received a notice in my mailbox. Not from the HOA, but from Karen's personal lawyer. It was a cease and desist letter accusing me of defamation, emotional distress, property damage, and something laughably vague called loss of social standing. I showed it to my cousin Danielle, who also happened to be a lawyer, and she burst out laughing before the second paragraph. She pointed out that not only had Karen violated multiple laws by hosting an event on my property without permission, but the very act of suing me would force her to legally confirm she was the one who broke into my yard and falsified information. In other words, Karen was trying to dig herself out of a hole with a shovel labeled, "More legal trouble." Danielle offered to handle the response. She drafted a formal counternotice explaining that if Karen pursued the matter, we'd be filing our own claims: trespassing, property damage, illegal use of utilities, and defamation. We even attached a monetary estimate: repairs, pool cleaning, landscaping restoration, and the cost of 4 destroyed patio chairs. The total came to a little over $8,000. A few days after receiving the letter, Karen's lawyer stopped returning calls. By Friday, she withdrew the complaint entirely. While the legal front simmered down, the internet side of things exploded further. The video passed 1 million views by the weekend. Memes began popping up everywhere. Someone did a remix of Karen yelling, "What did you do?" auto-tuned over club music. Another TikTok used clips of her face mid-scream with dramatic narration, turning her into a cartoon villain in a pretend superhero universe. The bouncy balls became a symbol of poetic justice. One clip showed the moment the balls burst from the pool, paired with the phrase, "Revenge served round and bouncy." I had neighbors knocking on my door just to say they loved the video. Someone left a basket of actual bouncy balls on my porch with a card that read, "Neighborhood MVP." Karen, on the other hand, was avoiding public spaces. She stopped her morning walks, canceled 2 committee events, and had her newspaper service paused. The woman who once posted hourly Facebook updates about keeping the community in line had gone completely silent online. The HOA board sent out a statement formally recognizing that Karen had acted outside the scope of her role and would no longer be authorized to plan or coordinate events for the rest of the year. They didn't even bother hiding their language. It was a polite way of saying, "You've been publicly humiliated and now we're officially done with you." Still, Karen wasn't the type to go down quietly. A week later, I saw her pacing near the property line with her phone in hand, snapping photos of my backyard. I pretended not to see her and let Charlie outside, which usually sent her scampering since she claimed she was mildly allergic to dogs with brown fur. She disappeared moments later. That same night, I got another letter, this one from a supposed neighborhood zoning advisor claiming my deck was structurally inconsistent with community safety parameters. It wasn't even printed on official HOA paper. Just some cheap stationery from an office supply store and a signature that read J. Mendez, which coincidentally was the name of Karen's cousin who worked at a print shop. I took photos, logged the letter, and handed it to Danielle. She filed it alongside the cease and desist nonsense, just in case Karen tried to stir things up again. It was clear she was scrambling, grasping at any excuse to regain power. But it was over. Everyone knew it. Her grasp had slipped, and she didn't have enough fingers left to hold on. As the dust settled, I decided to throw a real party. One that was actually mine, with invited guests, legal permits, and 0 unsolicited flute solos. I sent out invites to the entire neighborhood, making it clear Karen was not on the list. The theme? Celebration of boundaries. I even wrote it on the invitation. The twins set up a projector to show clips from the infamous pool incident, played alongside old-school arcade music and a slow fade-in text that read, "Know your limits. Know your property lines." The turnout was incredible. Neighbors brought drinks, food, lawn chairs. One couple brought an inflatable bounce house, just for fun. Everyone came up to me with their favorite parts of the video. A group of teenagers reenacted the scene of Karen spinning in the water, complete with a wig and floating drink cup. Laughter echoed across the yard late into the night. Toward the end of the evening, as I cleaned up plates and corralled errant rubber balls that had become something of a mascot, one of the HOA board members approached me. She was in her 60s, stern but fair, and had served on the board longer than anyone else. She leaned in and said, "You know, I've seen a lot of disputes in this neighborhood. But that was the most satisfying takedown I've ever witnessed." I smiled and raised my cup. "Sometimes you have to fight HOA nonsense with colorful nonsense." She nodded. "Keep doing what you're doing, Matt. We need more of you around here." By the time the party ended and the guests said their goodbyes, the backyard was littered with bouncy balls again, but this time it felt right. They were symbols now. Of resistance, of creative retaliation, of the absurd joy that comes from seeing the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood dethroned by her own ego and a few thousand rubber spheres. Karen may have started it, but I finished it. And the best part? I didn't need to raise my voice, call in favors, or break a single law. I just needed imagination, patience, and an outrageous amount of bounce. A few weeks passed, and life in the neighborhood returned to its usual rhythm, though with one noticeable change. Karen had vanished from public life. Her lawn went untrimmed, her porch lights stayed off, and her prized flamingo lawn ornament, which she once defended in a 7-page HOA memo, was gone. It was as if the bounce ball saga had deflated her spirit along with her status. And for the rest of us, it was nothing short of blissful. Without Karen's daily patrols, unsolicited flyers, or surprise walkthroughs with her clipboard, people began enjoying the neighborhood again. Kids rode bikes freely without being told their helmets were too shiny, couples planted whatever flowers they liked, and even the old man across the street, who Karen had once threatened with a citation over a wind chime, installed 3 more just because he could. I finally had the peace I'd bought the house for. My yard stayed my yard. My pool remained undisturbed. Charlie napped in the sun without the threat of yoga mats being laid around him like some kind of community shrine. And every so often, I'd find a rogue bouncy ball under a bush or lodged between patio cushions, and it would bring a grin to my face like a souvenir from a war I actually enjoyed fighting. But of course, peace in HOA land never lasts forever. One morning, I opened my mailbox to find a certified letter. Not from Karen. Not from her pretend lawyer cousin. This was from her homeowner's insurance provider. Apparently, Karen had filed a claim regarding her injuries and damaged property from the infamous party. The insurer, upon reviewing video evidence submitted by Karen herself, had not only denied the claim but had also flagged it for suspected fraudulent reporting. The letter included a formal notice that her policy had been dropped effective immediately. I nearly spilled my coffee laughing. A few days later, a for sale sign appeared in front of Karen's house. Rumors spread fast. Some said she was moving to Arizona to live with her sister. Others said she was being relocated for mental health recovery. A more popular theory, fueled by screenshots from her now private Facebook account, suggested she was attempting to start fresh in a more structured community, which people took to mean a place where her tyranny would once again be tolerated. Regardless of the real reason, the neighborhood let out a collective exhale. The woman who had spent years policing hedge heights and garden gnomes was finally gone. And then something unexpected happened. About a week after the sign went up, I received an envelope at my doorstep. No return address. Inside was a typed letter, neatly formatted and stapled in the upper left corner. It read more like a resignation speech than an apology. Karen admitted that she had overstepped, that the party had been inappropriate, that maybe, just maybe, her obsession with order had morphed into something toxic. She ended the letter with a line that surprised me. "You reminded me, in the most ridiculous way possible, that boundaries matter, even to people who think they're above them." I didn't quite know what to make of it. It wasn't an apology in the traditional sense. No, I'm sorry. No ownership of the lies she told the police or the HOA. But it was something. Maybe not redemption, but at least a moment of reflection. Still, I tucked it into a drawer and didn't give it much weight. The battle had been fought and won, and I wasn't looking for closure. I had already built that on a mountain of rubber spheres and unrelenting patience. To celebrate Karen's official departure, the neighborhood came together for one last hurrah. This time I didn't host it. The event was organized by a dozen families on the block, each one contributing food, games, and decorations. But they insisted it be held at my place, the now iconic battleground of the Great Bouncy Ball Uprising. I agreed, on one condition: no one was allowed to use the pool unless they asked first. Everyone laughed. Everyone agreed. And for the first time, I felt like we were actually functioning like a community instead of a collection of people being micromanaged by a woman with a whistle. The night of the party, the backyard was alive with chatter, music, and laughter. No speeches. No rules about cup colors or parking angles. Just people being people. The twins projected their now viral video one more time on a screen hung between two trees. The neighborhood laughed like they were seeing it for the first time. Even the slow-motion footage of Karen slipping into the shallow end brought thunderous applause. Someone made t-shirts that read, "Respect Property, Bounce Back," in blocky letters, with a little cartoon ball underneath. It was absurd, but it felt good. Toward the end of the night, as I was tossing away paper plates and gathering cups, I noticed something odd near the back gate. A basket. Inside it were two things: a single bouncy ball, bright pink with tiny smiley faces on it, and a key with a tag that said, "Use this next time the world tries to sneak in uninvited." No one saw who left it. There were no fingerprints, but I had a guess. Maybe Karen wasn't all villain, or maybe she was just tired of being one. Or maybe the internet had humbled her faster than any HOA meeting ever could. Either way, she was gone, and the silence she left behind was louder than any of her clipboard lectures had ever been. In the months that followed, the story of the Great Bouncy Ball Revenge became neighborhood legend. Kids reenacted it in their driveways with water balloons. A few dads tried to build their own launchers but mostly ended up with bruised egos and PVC burns. One mom tried to turn it into a lesson on civic boundaries for her daughter's Girl Scout troop, which ended with a glitter explosion that nearly set off the fire alarm in the clubhouse. And the HOA, now under new leadership, rebranded their image. They even hosted a Respect the Line community workshop, using my footage as an example of why communication and boundaries matter. Irony had never tasted so sweet. I got invited to speak at a local high school's digital citizenship class. They wanted to hear how someone could use humor, creativity, and legal precision to deal with community conflict. I opened my presentation with a simple slide, a photo of my backyard during the storm, bouncy balls floating everywhere, people screaming, Karen mid-fall, and a caption that read, "Sometimes the most powerful message is the one that bounces." Looking back, I never imagined something so petty could snowball into something this big. But maybe that's what made it powerful. Karen had tried to control everything around her. Other people's lawns, their mailboxes, their Christmas decorations. She thought the rules didn't apply to her, and when they finally did, it hit her with the force of 1,000 tiny rubber consequences. That summer ended with one final surprise. A reporter from a national online news site reached out asking if I'd be willing to do a short interview for a feature they were doing on viral justice in the internet age. I agreed, mostly for fun. We did the interview via video call, and I told the story from start to finish, laughing through most of it, proud of how far it had come. When the piece published, it was titled, "When HOA Drama Met 10,000 Bouncy Balls, How One Man Bounced Back." It got shared everywhere. I didn't make money from it. I didn't care. I made something better. I made my point. I reminded an entire neighborhood, and maybe a few million strangers, that standing your ground doesn't always mean yelling or threatening. Sometimes it means being patient, being clever, and when the moment comes, unleashing 10,000 brightly colored spheres as your final word. And sometimes that word is the only one that echoes long after the chaos clears. Bounce.